It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew a version 1.0 decklist to the commander right in front of us on my quest to brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing, and that's what we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description below. As always, I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, consider becoming a member or checking out the links in the description. I'd really appreciate it. But today, we're taking a look at one of the only few known commanders that we know of from Muraganda. We talked about Mimeoplasm last week, right? And we took a look at its old one and its new one. But to my knowledge, one of the only other commanders we know that's from Muraganda is Aeve, Progenitor, Ooze. A 5-mana 2/2 Ooze with Storm, so whenever we cast the spell, we get to copy it for each spell cast before it this turn. Aeve isn't a legendary if it's a token, so basically all these token copies we get Storm are going to be non-legendary. And then it enters with a +1/+1 counter for each Ooze you control. This is a really fun effect because even if you can't copy Aeve a ton, you're still going to get it to come in with counters on it. If you can copy, then all of his copies are going to come in with a ton of counters. And I think that's what we're trying to do. The other nice thing about Oozes in Magic is they all try to kind of split, make copies of themselves, go wide. And so I think we're going to be pretty able to get Aeve down in with some counters on it, make it a threat. And we're playing all that great mono-green stompy stuff to make it a threat as well. We can also pay off that we both want tokens of Aeve and other Oozes in our game plan. But starting this week, I just want to do something really quick. Thank you so much to my channel members. If you're interested in becoming a channel member, you can get the link down in the description below. It's never something I'm going to plug too often, but I appreciate that it exists, and I thank these two people for making it happen. But all right, let's get into our Oozes, and I think this is where, to me, I think I like the deck the most. I've always loved Oozes, specifically Biogenic Ooze. It's always a card I've liked. Comes in and makes a token at the end of each turn. End of your turn, you put a counter on each Ooze you control, and you can make more Oozes. I love the idea of this, growing all of our Oozes as we go, and making more Oozes. Same thing with something like Bio-Waste Ooze, or Blob. So this one buffs all our other Oozes. In the beginning of our upkeep, if we control a commander, we get a copy of Bio-Waste Blob. So that's pretty fun, right? Getting to grow a board. Of course, the blobs get bigger for the more blobs there are, right? Which is nice. And we get to grow the rest of our Oozes as well. The Consuming Blob says its power is equal to the number of card types among in our graveyard, and toughness is that one +1. So kind of our copy of Lurgoyf or Tarmogoyf. But at the beginning of each end step, we can create basically a copy of it that has the same ability. This is really fun because, again, we can go wider and really increase the amount of Oozes that we have. Green Slime is an Ooze with Foretell, so we can pay 2 to exile it from our hand face down, and then pay a green to have it come in and counter an activated or triggered ability from an artifact or enchantment source. Kind of an interesting ability, and there's a lot of I think there's a lot of scenarios where it can be really useful. You think about artifacts and enchantments, and there's a lot of key ones in a lot of decks in Commander. I think this could be a nice threat to kind of get out there and use at the right time. Manaplasm gets +X/+X, where X is each spell we cast. So that's pretty fun, right? Having it grow for what we're casting that turn. Metallic Mimic, obviously not an Ooze on the card, but it is an Ooze. We can have it come in and become an Ooze and buff all the rest of our Oozes. Actually, sorry, they come in with an extra counter on them. Ochre Jelly comes in with a bunch of counters on it. And when it dies, it says if you had 2 or more counters on it, create a token that's a copy of it being an next end step, and it comes in with half that many counters on it rounded down. So if you think about it, you're basically going to keep getting half as big Oozes, right, as it goes down and down and down. Ornery Ooze puts a counter on a creature you control whenever it comes in, and whenever it attacks, you put a counter on each attacking creature with a counter on it. So if we can find other ways to get counters on all of our creatures, we're going to get more counters, but mainly we're going to buff up Aeve as we attack him. Slurk All Ingesting comes in with 5 counters on it. Whenever it or another creature dies, if it had a counter on it, you put a counter on each creature you control that has a counter on it, which is really interesting and a nice ability to keep those counters going around. What I actually really like about this is if someone kills either the regular Aeve or a copy of it, you get to put those counters on other creatures, right, and making sure that you still have that power on the board. Splitting Slime is a 3/3 that for 6 mana we can make monstrous, so you put 3 extra counters on it, and you get a copy of it. So not bad, you can keep becoming monstrous and making more of them. Temperamental Ooze gives trample to all of our modified creatures, so all of our creatures that have counters on them are going to have trample, which is huge. That's what we want, right? With how these Aeve copies in them that are going to have counters on them. And I think March of the World Ooze just makes sense. Making all our Oozes 6/6s to go with all the counters there and all the other things that are going to be on them, I just feel like is really huge. And then whenever an opponent casts a spell, if it's not their turn, we get a 3/3 elephant. Remember, that elephant will then just be an Ooze as well. So, again, it just gives us more bodies, and it's going to kind of discourage our opponents from, playing spells so we get things. But I think where we really get to take advantage of these tokens are some of these green spells that we have. Things like For the Common Good makes tokens that are a copy of target token you control huge for Aeve's copies, right? Because then they still come in with the counters on them. And then all of our tokens get indestructible until our next turn, and we gain a life for each of them. Until our next turn is huge, because then we can do this, take a big attack. People can't wipe the board unless they're going to exile wipe the board, right? And then all of our Aeve copies are still there. Full Flowering just populates X times. So for each of those times, we create a token that's a copy of a creature token we control. Again, the point is, pick the Aeve copies since they're non-legendaries, and then they're going to have all those great abilities to come in with the counters. And then Gelatinous Genesis, just making XXX Oozes is at least at minimum a fun ability to make some Oozes that if we have just a ton of mana, nothing else to do, right? Second Harvest can make a copy of every token we control, which is a nice ability. And the fact that it's at instant speed is really great, because we could do it right before our turn if we want to take a big Alpha Strike. We could do it in response to a different... it's plenty of different things. If we have things that care about how many creatures we have, we could do it to increase that. There's a lot of scenarios where doubling your board or adding 3 or 4 creatures to your board could be huge. Let's say someone has something that has to force us to sacrifice a couple creatures. Well, do this, make a couple copies, sacrifice the copies you just made. There's a lot of scenarios, right, where that can come in handy. Doubling Season is going to double the amount of counters that are put on all our Aeve copies. The top half of Doubling Season is a little bit of a non-bow, because as an effect would create one or more tokens, it creates twice that many instead. Remember that Storm isn't an effect in the sense that we're not making tokens. It's basically just making the copies of Aeve as a token. So you're not going to get 2 of them with Doubling Season. But for anything else in our are those blobs and those kind of things, those will make double the tokens. But Doubling Season is really there for the counters, doubling the amount of counters that are put on all of our things. And then Gutter Grime, whenever another non-token creature we control dies, we get to put a slime counter and make an Ooze that's equal to the number of slime counters on it, which is a great ability, making some growing Oozes over the course of the game. But I think we get to take advantage of just this wealth of counters matters stuff that exists in our format. Ozolith gets to put an extra counter on it, on each thing that gets a counter, and we can tap it to put counters on things. That's really helpful for those things that care about everything having a counter. Hardened Scales, same ability, gets to add an extra one whenever we put a counter on. Innkeeper's Talent puts a counter on a creature at each of our combats, but we can upgrade it to both protect our permanents, giving them Ward 1 that have counters on them, and become another copy of that Doubling Season type effect. That's really helpful. There are some other ones in the deck, but I think these are the main ones. We're playing the Branching Evolutions of the world to get them doubled as well. But I think it's important to kind of use these abilities so that even if Aeve's only coming in with like 1 or 2 counters, you at least could potentially be 3, 4, 8. You know what I mean? There's a bigger high-end potential to those counters coming on rather than just coming in with 2, But I think just like any good green deck, we're going to take the fact we have this Go Wide Oozes plan, and we just want to try to make it our opponent's problems. Things like Overrun and Overwhelming Stampede to give them trample and a big buff. I love Nissa in any deck that can play it. Giving our creatures +1/+1 for each forest we control and trample. Again, we're playing a mono green deck, so we're playing almost all forests, meaning that Nissa, if you can get it out for just its cost, means you have at least 7, let alone more, and being a huge overrun effect for you. The other nice thing is her -1 is going to be able to take out key things, and her +1 makes these huge tokens, although they aren't Oozes, are still going to be useful for blocking, and then any more Alpha Striking. We're playing things like Triumph of the Horde. Of course, again, the end of the day, the goal of this deck is to end the game in combat, so we need to do it. Banner of the Kinship can help, growing all of our Oozes. And then we have something like Eldrazi Monument that can get all of our Oozes into the air and give them indestructible. Again, protecting them a little bit more for removal and making them harder to deal with. The truth is, if you're going to end a game in combat, we got to have some powerful pieces to end that game in combat. And that's what we're trying to do. Concurrent Crossroads can give all creatures haste, and mainly ours, but also our opponents. You got to be slightly careful with Concurrent Crossroads. You don't want to play it too early if your opponents are going to be able to make more things than you. But if you're in the driver's seat, we really want to play Concurrent Crossroads to get our creatures in there for damage. Garrick's Uprising can draw us cards with Aeve coming in, because it does come in with the counters, but mainly it's there for the trample, making sure that we get that trample in, and then Unnatural Growth can double all of our creatures' power and toughnesses during each combat, making them both great attacking and blocking threats for our opponent's stuff. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is our version 1.0 shot at Aeve, and really Ooze Tribal in general. But going into testing, I think there's a lot of ways you can take this. I didn't put the Ozolith in the deck. I'm sure some people are going to hate that. But the truth is, I just didn't think the $40 for it was worth it. I'd almost rather play the $40 for Vorinclex or even for something like Doubling Season in this deck, because I just think they're going to end up both being better uses of that money. But I can understand why the Ozolith is so good, especially considering that then Aeve can become more of a commander damage threat. The truth is, when you set yourself to a budget, sometimes you have to get rid of certain stapley things, and that was just the case here. Glorious Sunrise, to me, makes a ton of sense. I think there's a lot of great things about Glorious Sunrise. The +1/+1 and trample every turn in your combat feels really nice, especially in a deck that's trying to go wide. I also really like the ability to get some extra mana and the card draw. But the truth is, I think Glorious Sunrise comes down to, is +1/+1 and trample enough for you every turn? If it is, then I think it's a great card. If not, it's not. The truth is, we're going to run out of stompy staples eventually. And so the question is, do we need just a little bit more of that trample? Like, is it going to be the thing that's going to help us most of the time? And my gut tells me the answer is yes. I just wouldn't know without, running the deck through some game scenarios. And then Ooze Flux. Okay, pay 1 and a green and remove any number of counters you want from creatures you control and put an XX Ooze on the battlefield where X is the number of counters moved this way. I like this as an idea in the sense that there's probably a scenario where going wide is actually going to be more beneficial than going tall. It's very rare, in my opinion. I think going tall, especially when you're pairing it with trample, is almost always more important. But I think this is a nice flexible piece for you to do that and consider, is this something that's worth doing, especially if you need to cast Aeve. You could get a couple extra Oozes onto the board, and then you're getting more counters on Aeve, to then have a bigger Aeve in the copies when they come down. I think there's a lot of way to look at it, but the truth is, it is an option. But let's get what we like to do on the show the best. Let's get into our playtest. Remember, the goal of our playtest on the channel is not to find magical Christmas land. It's not to determine our best plays. It's to run through some opening hands, figure out how to set up our board state in order to find out how our deck looks in these early turns. Here we're keeping a 4-lander with Explore and Arcane Signet, a great start, and then Mana Plasm. I think the biggest thing for us to remember as we're setting up our board state and as we're getting towards Aeve on these first 2 turns is that we ideally want to cast Aeve and something else on the turn we cast it, right? Because we want that Storm. Otherwise, I worry we're kind of wasting the beauty of Aeve, unless we have a lot of other Oozes down, But the truth is, yeah, so here I think we do something like Explore. I was hoping we potentially hit something else, but we didn't. That's a-okay. We still get to play the additional land, right? Which is cool. So we're still good, right? We're still right, because we had 2 in the Arcane Signet. Land for turn. Paid, yeah. So the tribute helps putting some more counters on things as they come in, or drawing us cards when things come in. I did that right? Turn 2, we played that in the Arcane Signet. Turn 3, land, Explore, land. Okay. Turn 4, no land, but we're at 5 mana, so that's pretty good. We have the Rampant Growth, which is nice. We could also go into, like, Ochre Jelly. I kind of like the idea of, so if I play Mana Plasm, it gets 2 counters. And we can Rampant Growth for another land. That would put us into 6 mana for next turn, which is enough for the Ooze, or that. I also would love the idea of drawing, trying to draw into some more stuff, but we don't really have anything quite yet. I guess we could get the Ooze down, but it doesn't come in with a counter, right? It just draws. Let's play the Mana Plasm. It comes in with 2 counters. Then we'll play the Rampant Growth just to get ourselves going a little bit more on value. My thought here is it just gives us an extra land for next turn. And there we see Court of Calling, a great search piece, allows us to pay mana and go get specific things. What in our deck would we really want here? I mean, I love the idea of something like Biogenic Ooze, which is just going to spread those counters out. We do have enough to do it. The question is it worth our entire, or it would be 8, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, we only have 7. I'm just trying to think of what else, right, is worth it out of our deck that I'm trying to think about, but it's not a bad option. So Oozewag would draw me a card. It would just leave me down to 2 mana. Because I'm trying to think of what do I play with Aeve, right, to get a Storm on the same turn. Let's try it. Let's try the Oozewag, draw a card, and we see Growing Rights. Growing Rights is great because it flips over to the backside and taps for a green for each creature we control. We don't have enough to adapt it. Manaplasm could be a good attacker this turn. Let's get this turn. I like the idea of the talent into the Aeve. We're just 1 mana off, right? We would need 1 more mana. Growing Rights flips over if we have 4 more creatures. So could we get a world where we could Growing and something else and get to it next turn? Well, let's see what I think we can get up to 3 creature systems. So Growing Rights lets us look at the top 4. Get a creature from them put into our hand. That's kind of brutal. We didn't get one, but that's a-okay. Would have liked to have kept that I would have liked to have kept that Ozolith or that Overwhelming Stampede. But we ochre for... That was 3. I guess we ochre for 3. Or 2, sorry. Because of the... 2 because of the X. It's going to come in and get 2 counters. Because of Tribute. And then, now we're not in bad shape. I mean, now the Oozewag is giving our guys Trample. This mana... Plasm would be, what, 9/9 this turn with Trample, so we can get in for some damage. And then there's our land. So my thought here is, what, Innkeeper's Talent into the Aeve. The copy comes in with 3 counters, and that's going to draw us a card off of the Tribute. And then the real one comes in with 4 counters, right? And that's going to get us a draw off the Tribute. That's why I like the Tribute in this scenario. And then now... I think Innkeeper's Talent puts 1 on the Oozewag at combat. These guys now have Trample and can get in. And then on the end step, right, now Growing Rights is going to flip over, turning into our little mini Gaia's Cradle. And I think now we're in great shape to, on our turn, do the March Ooze to bring them all up to 6/6s, make them huge with the counters on them. We can go into the Court of Calling for something else. I think this isn't a bad place to stop. We've got the Stompy Train run, and the only thing we really need... more than this is just ways to get more counters, right? Because we have the Trample there, so we're going to start hitting hard. Again, I'd love a way to copy Aeve if possible, but the truth is I like the Ooze just to put more counters on. We can start making... Next turn, we can spend the 5 mana to make them... Or the 1 mana to give them Ward 1, and then the extra mana if we want to get double the counters. Because we have 6, and then 5 for the Itlamok. Right, so we've got lots of mana. I mean, we could Ooze plus do it the whole way up. We could go March of the Ooze and Biogenic Ooze, and there's so many options there for us there. But let's get into the next one. Keeping a 3-lander with Kadama's Reach for some ramp. We've got the Predator Ooze, which whenever it attacks, you put a counter on it. And whenever it's dealt damage, whenever a creature dealt damage by it dies, we get to put a counter on it so it can grow. And then Scavenging Ooze is a good way to get itself to grow by exiling things out of people's graveyards. But turn 1, we see Wild Growth. We'll take it. Good way to get ourselves ramping. Turn 2, we see the Bio-Waste Blob. I think I kind of want to just Kadama's Reach here, right? Get the party started. This also gives us more mana, right? And keeps the process going. Here on turn 3, we have 5 mana, right? But obviously there's no reason to get Garruk's Uprising down just yet, right? We're just basically asking to... Right, put some damage on it. I'm trying to think. I love getting the Bio-Waste Ooze down, but the Bio-Waste Blob, but the problem is we just don't have that commander yet to make copies of it. If I do this turn, next turn I have 6 mana. What am I doing? My thought was, depending on what's in the graveyard, you could even just get Scavenging Ooze down this turn and maybe get a card exiled with it. But I guess we'll get the Blob down. Now this turn we have 6 mana. There's the Ornreef Ooze, right? Not a bad idea. We need a way to get counters on all of our things, right? Next turn we could look to do like Scooze plus Aeve and get an extra copy. So I'm thinking what? Ornreef Ooze. I guess we'll put a counter on the Blob. Ooze will give me more Oozes for next turn, right? Really give a chance for Aeve to grow. So kind of like that. The Byways Blob could attack this turn, but it's just a 2/2. And then here again, I'm thinking Scooze plus Aeve. Aeve's copy comes in with 4, right? And the real Aeve comes in with 5. Not too shabby, right? Ornreef can attack if we want it to get another counter on Byways Blob. Remember, they all get +1, +1. The Predator could attack, right, this turn, getting it a counter. The only thing we really need a counter on is that Ooze, right? Since it really wants a counter on itself for that. But now we're really setting up these nice attacks. And then this turn, we get a copy of the Blob, throw the Garruk's Uprising down, draw a card. And now we can just hold up that Heroic Intervention, right? And we're in great shape. Just start attacking. The Aves are going to grow because of the Ornreef Ooze. And the Blobs are buffing the whole board. I like this board state. We're getting there. I just wish we could get there like a turn earlier. Other than that, I think we look good. Let's get into playtest number 3. Keeping a 3-lander with stocking the pantry. Good way to take counters. Whenever you put counters on things, you get a counter on pantry, and you can take two mana to take a counter off of pantry to draw cards. We got the Innkeeper's Talent to give out counters and overrun, so I don't mind this one. I think we're just trying to get ourselves up and try to see if we can get some Oozes. So here I think we just Rampant Growth on 2. Turn 3, there is the so we got the talent. There's Ravenous Slime. Can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. And if a creature an opponent controls would die, instead exile it and put counters on that from that creature's power, equal to that creature's power, onto the slime. So I'm thinking maybe slime plus the pantry this turn. Though I kind of like the pantry on a turn where we play Aeve, right, to get an extra, Storm Trigger, but I hate to waste the mana. So here on 5, right, again, ideally I'd like to keep something up to get Aeve in with, but I'm thinking just Talent plus Ozolith. We can even tick Talent up this turn since we've got the spare mana. And then that way we get 2 counters on the Ravenous Slime this turn to get it to be a little bit more of a threat. This will put a counter on the pantry, because it's just whenever you put 1 or more. Then next turn, again, now we're at the mana for Aeve. We would just ideally like, we'd like to put something else on the board first. Again, we really would love to ideally Storm, right? So my thought is we could remove the counter from the pantry to draw here. We're putting ourselves in an awkward position. We come back up to 5 mana. If I cast Aeve, it's still getting its counters, but I'm just missing out on some of that value. I could also pay the life to get Nissa down. And my thought here is just tick her up to make that token. My only thought here is, like, at least we're getting something down that we can use on a future turn. This comes in with 9 counters instead of 8 because of Ozolith. And my thought here is now we're just putting another piece of board down on Presence. Now our opponents have to deal with Nissa, and we've got some great blockers for it. Now this turn we're at 5, 6, 7, 8 mana. I can still remove to draw and cast Aeve. I think I've just kind of got to do it, right? She comes in with 1 counter, which would be put up to 2. Putting a counter here, because my thought is we gotta, as much as we love the idea of trying to wait forever, the truth is we kind of gotta, right, eventually we gotta get it going. They're coming in with Ward 1, start a combat, we can put, right, some more counters. We can either destroy something or make another horror, right, just to protect ourselves. And then we actually would, we're 1 mana off doing the Ozolith as well this turn. But again, what, 1 here, and this again goes to 10 because we ticked Nissa up to do it. So now we're just creating, right, some horrors that aren't going to go away when we -7 her. And I think this isn't a bad state. I mean, the truth is, this turn we can double up on Overrun and Nissa's ability, probably to just overkill if no one takes care of Aeve. This is 9 plus 3, so +12/+12. And Trample could be a big hit for our opponents. We could also tick Innkeeper's Talent up so that when we go to put the counter on with Innkeeper's Talent, it's actually going to be 1, 2, doubled to 4, which would put Aeve at 6 and 10. That would be 22 with Trample, which could be command damage to that. Truth is, we would have loved to have seen an extra Ooze or two. We saw it potentially with just a little bit late with the Charm, which can go get us a creature. But the truth is, we could still draw this turn with the Pantry. There's a lot of options here. I feel like this line, we just saw more lands than anything else. But that's A-okay. Let me know, what do you think of Aeve down in the comment section below. I like the idea. I think some nuance needs to be fixed in testing, but remember, that's the goal of this show, is to give a first rough draft of the deck and then take it into testing and have some fun. But I'd love to know what you think, and I will catch you all in the next one.